you risk everything to save a helpless animal teetering on the edge of death? Masai did. And what unfolded years later is something you'll never forget. Was it instinct, compassion, or something even deeper? The sky above the Masai Mara plains was a heavy, brooding grey. Thick, black clouds churned overhead, a forewarning of the unforgiving rainy season to come. The once golden grasslands, normally swaying gently under the sun, now trembled beneath the relentless downpour. In this bleak landscape, a lone cheetah cub trudged forward, its frail body trembling from the ravages of time and weather. Once the last flicker of hope for its family, the cub had been left behind days ago, its strength long since depleted. The once sleek, golden fur, dappled with spots, was now matted with mud and the crusted remains of dried blood. One hind leg dragged awkwardly behind, perhaps the result of a wound suffered during a desperate escape. Ribs jutted sharply beneath its stretched, thin skin, a cruel record of days gone without food. It stood silently, watching a herd of Thompson's gazelles dart across the plain. Its eyes, clouded and weary, held the quiet recognition that its hunting instincts were slipping away. For days, the cub wandered across muddy fields, its belly gnawed by hunger. Barely a few months old, it was far too young to survive alone in this unforgiving land. It scoured the terrain for scraps, leftovers from a hyena feast or the remains of a leopard's kill. But the rains had come early this year, washing away every trace. Each step grew heavier, its spirit dimmer. By the 5th day of unbroken rain, the cheetah was little more than a shadow of itself. Every move sent tremors through its weakened frame, shivers coursing through its body from hunger and cold. Yet still, it pushed forward, stubborn, desperate, driven by one last flicker of instinct, to find its mother, to find its kin. Every hoarse cry it let out was swallowed by the falling rain. It lifted its head to the sky, as if pleading for a miracle. That afternoon, with the sun reduced to a faint glow behind thick clouds, the cub wandered into what used to be a shallow field, now turned into a deadly mud trap. Desperate for higher, drier ground, it took a gamble and stepped forward. Each paw sank deep into the softened earth. It struggled, but the mud only clung tighter. The same legs that once struck fear into prey and predators alike had become helpless anchors. The more it fought, the deeper it sank. Panic surged through its tiny body. It let out a growl, no more than a hoarse whisper. The world around it remained indifferent, only rain and mud responded. Its heart pounded wildly, muscles burned with effort. Every attempt to pull itself free only sped up its descent. Time lost all meaning. Minutes felt like hours. By now, its frail frame was submerged to the chest. Exhaustion weighed down on it like a stone. Its mind screamed to keep fighting, but the body had surrendered. Its eyes drifted shut, and the final thought was a longing to return to the warmth of its mother, the safety of the herd. Across the field, Masai stood watching. A sturdy African man in his 40s, his frame was strong, but his eyes always seemed shadowed by a quiet sorrow. Once, he had been a husband and a father. He lived with his wife and son in a small home near the riverbank. But 10 years ago, a sudden flood swept everything away, his house, his family, his world. Since that day, Masai never left this land. Villagers said he was haunted, but to Masai, staying was the only way to hold on to what life hadn't yet stolen, his final memories, fragments of a love now gone. Until one day, it started like any other morning. Masai, with his short spear slung across his back, walked quietly along the banks of the Talek River. His eyes scanned the faint markings in the dirt. Perhaps from a field mouse, a wild hare, or a young antelope separated from its herd. He was searching for something to feed himself later that evening. Then something caught his eye. an odd shape on the distant horizon. Just a smudge of brown in the middle of the gray, but something about it made his chest tighten. A faint sound reached his ears, rising from the dry riverbed. It wasn't the cry of a hunting predator, nor the chirp of insects that usually filled the morning air. It was hoarse, broken, like a desperate call for help clawing its way from the throat of a creature nearly lost. Mosey moved slowly toward the patch of dried mud in the middle of the riverbed. Each step left deep prints in the cracked ground beneath him. When he got within 20 meters, he crouched, watching closely. As he approached, Mosey's heart clenched. There, almost swallowed by the thick gray mud, lay a cheetah cub, emaciated, tiny, nearly indistinguishable from the filth around it. The golden, spotted coat, once emblematic of its kind, was now matted, smeared with dirt and dried blood. Its body was curled up and motionless, as if nothing more than a discarded shell slowly sinking into the broken earth. He looked around. No sign of the mother. No paw prints. No sound other than the buzz of flies. Mosey briefly assumed it was already gone, another casualty of hunger, thirst, and relentless rain. But then he noticed it, the faintest rise and fall of a tiny chest, so slight it could only be seen by someone who had stopped to look. Really look. It's still alive, Mosey whispered, kneeling beside the cub, his breath mingling with the warmth rising from the sun-baked earth. Mud clung to his pant legs, mosquitoes whined by his ears, sweat trickled down his temple. Mosey understood the choice in front of him. If he stepped into the mud, he might get stuck. Or worse, if the mother cheetah returned, she could attack. But if he turned away now, that tiny creature would surely die. A slow, lonely death that no one would witness. He didn't take his eyes off the cub. Then he took a long breath. He didn't call for help. He didn't wait for a miracle. He simply told himself, if I've survived losing everything, I can do this. With careful, deliberate steps, Mosey entered the mud. Each footfall was a calculated risk. He placed his weight only where the ground looked firmer. He began by clearing the muck from the cub's face, helping it breathe more easily, even though he knew the odds were slim. Then, without hesitation, he turned and sprinted back to his tent. He flung open an old wooden chest in the back, his former guide gear from the days when he led safaris, and pulled out a sturdy leather rope and a coarse wrap. Back at the muddy pit, Mosey approached the cub slowly. Beneath the dried blood and sludge, its eyes blinked open, exhausted but no longer afraid. "Easy, little one," he whispered. He didn't reach out right away. Instead, he wrapped the cloth gently around its front legs, protecting himself from any sudden reflex. Then, with slow, steady movements, he looped the rope around its belly and under its hind legs, avoiding its claws and teeth, every motion deliberate and cautious. The mud was slick, and the small body was half submerged in the thick muck. Every pull was a dangerous dance. Mosey had to reposition himself 3 times, adjusting the rope to keep the cub's body from slipping out. His muscles began to burn from the strain of hauling the dead weight from the sticky pit. The mud fought back like a monster trying to drag its prey under. The cub whimpered, only its head still visible, breath shallow and breaking. "Don't give up. Stay with me," Mosey shouted, voice raw from exhaustion. Minute by minute, he pulled, legs trembling, hands aching. Inch by inch, the cub rose, leaving a thick trail of mud in its wake. After 30 grueling minutes, Mosey finally broke free from the trap. He collapsed to his knees, gasping, heart pounding. The cheetah cub lay beside him, chest rising and falling, eyes half open, a portrait of survival. Their eyes met. There was something there. Gratitude, understanding, a bond that blurred the lines between man and beast. Mosey gently loosened the rope and stepped back. The cub, though frail and exhausted, was still wild, still dangerous, But as he retreated, the little cheetah tried to stand and fell. Mosey's heart clenched. That day, beneath the shade of a tree near his tent, Mosey tended to the cub's wounds. He washed the bite marks with medicinal leaves, bound its leg with a soft strip of bark. When night fell, he laid the cheetah beside a small fire, shielding it from biting insects. He gave it a name, Pili, which means hope in Swahili. Pili didn't whimper or resist. She just breathed gently, lying still, surrendering her fate to this quiet man. There was something in her eyes, not trust exactly, but no longer fear. In the days that followed, Mosey devoted himself entirely to her care. Each morning, he crushed wild herbs into a paste, mixed it with egg yolk, and spooned it into her mouth. In the afternoons, he stoked the fire, keeping her warm with glowing coals covered in ash. The wounds began to dry. Scratches on her skin started to scab over. By the 7th day, Pili could stand on her own. Her gait was still shaky, but the light had returned to her eyes. Mosey built a bamboo enclosure around the tent, giving her room to move without wandering off. He began to teach her the skills she'd need to survive, how to follow the scent of blood, how to stalk from the tall grass, and most importantly, how to recognize and avoid stronger predators. Pili grew quickly. After just 4 months, she stood as tall as an adult's waist. Her fur had regained its luster, and her black spots were sharp and defined, like ink drops scattered across golden silk. She no longer ate from Mosey's hand. She hunted. First it was field mice, then wild hares, and now and then a stray bird. Mosey didn't stop her. He simply watched, sometimes nodding in quiet approval, sometimes frowning when she got too reckless. And with that, a distance began to grow. Pili no longer slept at the foot of the bed. She now rested in the far corner of the bamboo yard. Each morning she left the tent earlier, returned later. And every time Mosey called, she still turned back, but never came running. She'd stop a few steps away, give a small nod, then move on. Mosey understood. The wild inside Pili had awakened. She belonged to the savannah, not the bamboo walls. He had told himself he was ready for this moment, but when it came, it felt like something tearing straight through his chest. One morning, the fog rolled in thick, so dense he couldn't even see the trees across the river. Mosey woke up, made his tea, and glanced toward her usual corner. Nothing. He figured she was hidden somewhere in the mist, but as the light sharpened, he realized the spot was completely bare. No fresh paw prints, no sound, no scent he recognized. Pili was gone. No roar, no farewell, no turning back. Mosey stood motionless for a long time. He didn't run after her. He didn't call her name, because deep down he knew this was her way. Quiet. Final. That afternoon, as he walked around the tent like he always did, he passed the bamboo post on the left side of the porch, the one Pili used to rub her back against. He stopped. There, etched deep into the wood, were claw marks. 3 clean slashes, sharp enough to cut the grain. Mosey reached out and touched them. It wasn't a careless scratch. It felt like a sign, a message. I've grown up, and I won't forget. That night, for the first time in many months, Mosey's tent was silent. No low growls. No soft footfalls. Years passed, and life in the Masai Mara settled into new rhythms. The land had changed. Rough dirt tracks were now upgraded for patrol vehicles, and checkpoints dotted the forest's borders. But danger still crept through the tall grass and shadows, this time in the form of guns and greed. Poachers were no longer just local men with snares and wooden spears. The threat had gone global, organized, brutal. Mosey was no longer the solitary man by the river. He had become the head ranger of the reserve, a symbol of discipline and resolve. For nearly a decade he had walked, driven, and guarded every stretch of the land. The rhythm of the savannah, the subtle shifts in animal behavior, the scent of rain before it fell. It was all part of him now. And yet there were still days when his eyes swept the plains, searching for a certain familiar flash of gold. Then came the day. It started with an urgent alert. A motion sensor in the southern Talek region, near the Kenyan border, had picked up something unusual. A strange tire track sliced across the patrol path. A herd of antelope had suddenly vanished from the camera feed. Mosi didn't hesitate. He took 2 young rangers with him, along with radios and tranquilizer rifles. Not for the wildlife, but for protection if needed. They drove a pickup truck across open grasslands, stopping near a cluster of old acacia trees where the earth looked disturbed. By midday, they found it, a deep pit trap, camouflaged with dry grass and nylon mesh, stretched across an animal trail. Mosi signaled the team to fan out and check the perimeter. He stepped onto a small rise, a habit of his for better vantage, but just then the ground beneath him gave way. Mosi plunged straight into the trap. The fall wasn't far, but it was enough to twist his left ankle. Mosi sprang up and tried to climb out, but the pit walls had been angled and slicked with clay, impossible to grip. As he reached for the edge, 3 figures appeared above him. 3 men in camouflage, heavily armed, faces blank, carved with the cold expression of those long accustomed to killing. Without a word, they raised their guns. The matte black barrels gleamed, sharp, merciless, shrinking the space between life and death to just a few heartbeats. No help came. The radio signal was jammed. The 2 young rangers had been led astray from the beginning. This was a double-layered trap, calculated to precision. Mosi had nowhere to run. He stood his ground, eyes locked on the man in the center. Not in hope, but in defiance, as if to cling to one last shred of dignity in the face of the inevitable. Then, a piercing roar split the air. From the tall reeds just meters away, a shadow burst forward like a lightning bolt. In the blink of an eye, the first poacher dropped to the ground, his throat torn open. Before the others could even raise their rifles, the creature had already shifted course, leaping onto a rock, then springing again with flawless precision, a leap honed through 1,000 silent drills. When the dust settled, all 3 men lay motionless, weapons scattered far from their reach. And there she stood, a fully grown cheetah, muscles honed, eyes blazing like fire. Mosi froze. His eyes widened, not in shock, but at the surge of something unnameable rising from deep within his chest. The cheetah stepped closer to the pit. She didn't roar again. She stopped just under 2 meters from Mosi and stared at him. It wasn't the look of a wild predator eyeing prey. It was something else. A look he knew. A gaze he'd seen countless nights beside the fire, between a solitary man and a fragile life clinging to survival. Then, from the brush behind her, 3 more cheetahs emerged. One by one they stepped into view, each movement cautious, deliberate. They encircled the pit, tense but silent. No snarls, no pounce, just eyes, watching. A tense stillness fell, like a scale swaying between instinct and memory. Then Pili let out a low, short hiss, a signal. Instantly the 3 cheetahs shifted, their ears folded back, bodies lowered. They sat, alert but no longer threatening. They were waiting for her command. Mosi felt like he couldn't breathe, but not from fear, from something deeper, something overwhelming. He moved slowly, disbelieving that a wild cheetah had risked her life for him. Blood dripped from a cut on his arm. His knees trembled from the strain, but he had to get closer. The ranger approached his savior carefully, expecting the animal to back away. Wild creatures don't show vulnerability. But Pili didn't flinch. She turned her head, and their eyes met. In that moment, Mosey did something he hadn't done in years. He knelt beside the wild cheetah. He reached out and touched her fur. "You saved me," he whispered, feeling the rapid thrum of her heartbeat under his palm, exhausted, yet resolute. Then she turned, and without a sound, she walked away. The three others followed, gliding past the fallen poachers without so much as a glance back. Hours later, when the other rangers finally found him, Mosey's face was unreadable. No fear, no anger, just a rare, profound stillness, as if the world's noise had been pulled inward into the quiet space of his heart. He didn't speak of Pili. Not one word. No sign that what had just happened was more than a rescue, that it was a reunion, one that defied time, instinct, and everything the wild was supposed to be. The others nodded, not fully understanding. They began clearing the site, calling for backup, photographing the evidence. Mosey simply stood, dusted himself off, and slowly walked back toward the truck. The Masai Mara continued its eternal cycle. Chases, survival, hunts, and losses. But for Mosey, from that day on, everything had changed. He still did his ranger's work, patrolling the land, taking notes, mentoring the next generation. Still lived simply beside the Talek River, in the same hand-built tent he had called home for years. But something in his eyes had shifted. Not just the quiet resilience of a man who had known loss, but the deeper calm of someone who now understood what we give from the heart is never truly lost. In a world ruled by instinct, where blood and flesh write the laws, the gratitude of a wild cheetah became living proof that true love can transcend even nature's deepest codes. Mosey never tried to keep Pili, never expected her to return or repay the debt. But in the moment between life and death, all he had once given, rescue, care, patience, came back to him in a way no one could have foreseen. We often believe that goodness must be witnessed to have meaning, but that's not true. Real love is given freely, without expectation, and even in the harshest of places, kindness still has the power to save a life.